So it should come as no real surprise that the furry fandom of today is significantly more fragmented and fractured along political lines than it was in the past. As in, we are a fandom divided. But how did we get here? What were the sort of, real-time events and various other, transgressions that led up to this point? Why are people basically down each other's throats about everything from politics to basically opinions about various other things that may or may not have an actual real-life impact on their lives? Well, this obviously didn't happen overnight, and the furry fandom at large has always had a bone of contention to sort of address, As an example, and I know I cited this before, the Burn Furs movement is a very good example of how divided the fandom could be, how divisive various topics of interest could be. Of course, the contrast is that the Burn Furs movement is significantly different as far as the premise and the purpose of, Burn Furs as opposed to today, where you basically have a contrast between conservative furries and liberal furries, and all points in between. You have varying individuals that express themselves as skeptics and various other people and critics from the right versus people on the left who are more liberalized in their ideology, as well as what the opinions that they espouse happen to be. But this wasn't exactly an overnight phenomenon. This had transpired over a period of years. And I would argue that Twitter is basically the proverbial battleground right now. So obviously, I'm going to start off in a more recent sense to what I was sort of privy to, just observing it from the ground up. Basically, the Obama administration had more or less normalized very progressive ideals and very liberal ideas that were, previously unheard of. And it was sort of taken as an orthodoxy in the furry fandom that you would adhere to, acceptance, tolerance, basically opening your arms to the LGBT community, of which the furry fandom happens to be, very open to these days. And again, this isn't a bad thing per se. I'm just saying that this is basically, how it's been for a while. The furry fandom has always been predominantly liberal, but it seems as though with the Obama administration, a lot of the ideals that you hadn't really seen at the forefront being an issue had been a very contentious one. And it was sort of seen as a grand victory that, gay marriage, trans rights, and various other, policies that were passed and, held as sacred, came to be. Now, this is not a bad thing. What is for me is when you sort of engage in identity politics and find distinction between you and someone else. Basically, it would be like me stating, hey, I'm Korean American, so I'm only going to associate with Korean Americans and look for Korean American interests, as opposed to my fellow Americans at large, be they black, white, Hispanic, or, all points in between. So, and again, I'm not trying to make this controversial, I'm just saying as I understand it. So, you have an 8-year period, give or take. Obviously, the ideals had always been there prior to Obama. So these ideals didn't just come to prominence under his leadership. However, a lot of legislation was passed that saw to, an expansion of rights for and protections for, the LGBT community. So obviously, when somebody like Trump comes along, and a lot of the policies that he espouses or states that he's going to pass into law, as well as the reputation of Mike Pence and various other people that would be a part of his cabinet, would cause a lot of concern and uproar for various furries out there that see their, basically their existence in the U.S. under threat. Now, whether or not this is true, we can have a sit-down conversation sometime and really discuss this, but you saw the best of both worlds, well, I should say the worst of both worlds, when you, look at all points of social media. You had people that were actually, they thought they were fighting for their lives. And so, when Trump was announced winner in 2016, you had people that really were just gripped in blind terror. They were panicking for at least a 2-week to a month period, where they literally thought that neo-Nazi death squads were going to be prowling the countryside, shooting, women, people of color, myself included, and basically just anybody that wasn't a white nationalist. Now, obviously, the reality is that the outcome was far less climactic. far more anticlimactic than it was climactic, you know. None of that stuff happened. Of course, you had isolated incidents of basically people being assholes to one another. You had a lot of basically false hate attacks, like people basically like deface their own property and try to claim that, you know, mean people came over and attacked them. I'm not trying to make this like political, but it is a very serious point of contention to mention here because it had a lot of bearing on the furry community. You know, the furry community being a microcosm of greater society at large. So, that being stated, basically what happened was, up to that point, you had people that, through the entire duration that Hillary Clinton, Bernie Sanders, and various other people were running for office, as well as Donald J. Trump, people were just going toe-to-toe, and it really fractured some families, like, out there. And if like, this particular election was enough to fracture a family to the point that they would not see each other for Thanksgiving or various other family get-togethers, then you can just imagine how it would react to the furry fandom that is, you know, in my opinion, predisposed to drama as it is. So, people took to Twitter, friendships were quite literally fractured, you know, people, if you adhered to a certain, I guess, opinion, or espouse a certain ideology, or a number of ideologies, then you're pretty much broken into, you know, 3 camps: right, left, and center. And right and left basically felt validated in what they were espousing, which means that any centrists or any moderates were basically expected to take a side. And both sides basically took it as their side being quote-unquote correct. Correct, or basically that the ideals that they were espousing were correct and that they were self-evident, and that you'd basically be an idiot for not, you know, joining up with either side. And, you know, this is where you really saw the sparks start to fly. Basically, people would just denigrate each other, they would attack each other, they would be smear campaigns, basically. I say smear campaigns not because these people hold political office or because they're, you know, semi-VIP important people. I say this because word would get out about certain people espousing a certain opinion or, you know, certain ideas that were considered problematic, be it right or left. And they would basically just announce this over Twitter and try to spread the word as far as possible. And in some cases, they would actually try to dox the people that were, you know, espousing the opinion. And any group that got together and really found a bone of contention with these individuals, they'd basically be a target, you know? And considering that the furry fandom is supposed to be, you know, one, you know, united fandom, word got around really quickly, and so people would just sort of rally around, and any, like, piece of evidence, be it a screenshot from, like, a conversation, or, hell, their own tweets, because people would just, like, say things, and then they would immediately try to delete the evidence. And, you know, this is when you got people, like, really emotionally invested in all of this. They would take, you know, archives, they would archive everything that was stated. There would be moments where they would actually, like, take, you know, actually recorded conversations from Skype or Discord, and they would adulterate the audio so that anything that they were saying would be taken out of context, you know? And it was very interesting. You saw people, like, actually take a look at the audio in a program, and they would notice that there's certain breaks in the audio, and the breaks only happen if it's been adulterated, like you cut certain parts out. So you see, like, a rapid, like, diminishing of, like, volume in, like, certain parts, and it's very inconsistent. It's just, like, sort of a way that you can tell if something's been doctored or not, but at the same time, it's just like, you know, dude, I have a full-time job, I have hobbies, I have, you know, other pursuits that I'm trying to do. I cannot imagine people having this much time to devote towards, like, just getting a one-up on somebody else for the sake of a political notch on your belt, you know? But this is all going on, you know, for a couple years now. And I'm not sure if any of you, like, have seen this, if you have borne witness to this, but it's really been a pretty damaging phenomena. And, you know, a couple years down the line, we're already in 2018, like 2 years after the election was more or less, you know, completed. And the problem has never really gone away. I mean, you have people that are either on right or left that genuinely think that their existence on God's green earth is under threat, that they need to get up right now and defend their rights, or defend their ideologies, or to consolidate their what little power that they have, be it at the ballot box or they as people, and to basically convey to others their opinions. And you know, I take it as a combination of various factors. Identity politics has certainly done a number on the fandom today, basically you know, segregating people into various, you know, smallish groups by which they hold others. Your association to the people in that group, it goes so far as your political agreement on certain tenets, and if all people are not in agreement of certain tenets, or at least tolerant of those beliefs, that's a problem. Like, they can't have that. And so then the labels come about: libtard, conservative, Nazi, fascist, bigot. You know, like, basically anything that they can, you know, put, like, paste on somebody to smear their good name. And it's been a real problem because, honestly, the furry fandom's supposed to be an escape from reality. It's not supposed to be this political movement. And so you have, like, going forward, hyperbole, basically, like, anything problematic means that you're automatically... Basically, it's like anybody right of, like, you know, Stalin or Chairman Mao is, like, a fascist. And that anybody, like, remotely, I guess, espousing any, you know, vaguely, anything that can be construed as, like, liberal ideology is automatically a communist or a socialist. And obviously, you have a lot of people that are just, like, in the middle. They don't want to... They might agree with right or left on certain issues, but they're not going to agree with them on all. And they unfairly get castigated by both, like, you know, right and left about various issues that come about. And it's just, you know, been a real drag on the fandom at large. And I think in light of the Kira the Wolf scandal, that was really the first time that you saw right and left sort of come together in agreement that what had transpired amongst the Zoophiles, Snake Thing, and the Beastly Beasties as a group was truly decadent and horrid and abhorrent. And that was the first time that you got any sort of agreement between right or left. So then you had the phenomena, like, a long time ago. I say a long time ago by, like, maybe 2 years ago. Alt-furry as a group. Alt-furry as a group was supposed to be taken as alternative furry. Quite literally alternative furry. I think, personally, that based on the alt, you know, in front of the tagline furry, was probably a pretty bad strategic move, but at the same time, you know, quite literally it was supposed to be an alternative furry. You had varying people that were associated with that group that were, as I described, right, left, and center. The only thing that they really agreed on at its core identity was the fact that social justice and various other sort of, I guess, very liberalized ideologies had come to overtaken the fandom to the point that it was just choking the fun out of it, and it was, you know, pretty much seen as bullshit that people can just, like, smear people or dox people or just attack them for, you know, perceived transgressions that really didn't have any bearing on the rest of the furry at large. And for me personally, the interactions I saw between Pepper Coyote and JSONFX were a perfect, like, example of this. Pepper Coyote approached JSONFX, had initiated a sit-down conversation by which the two would have a mano-a-mano conversation about politics and various other things, and it really condensed down to Pepper Coyote attacking JSONFX because he felt that the opinions that JSONFX espouse are damaging, that JSONFX has more responsibility because he's a noticed quote-unquote popufur that has an audience, and that he needs to take responsibility for his actions and what he says to his audience. And the problem with that is Pepper Coyote has actually, you know, said worse things in the public setting, being Twitter. As in, when people gave him pushback for what he tried to basically tell people, hey, don't market to these people are fascists. And, you know, one of his own, like, fans was basically like, dude, like, you're not in a position to tell vendors who they can and can't sell to. And, like, I don't think it's, like, right that you record in a, like, an area like this. And Pepper Coyote's only response was, this is war! We gotta do anything we can! And it's just like, dude, like, get over yourself. If you're a Pepper Coyote fan, that's great, but he might be a great, like, guitarist and, like, singer, but at the same time, I think that the things that he has said up to that point are a perfect example about why this fandom is so divided today. You know, I'm not saying that you shouldn't have political beliefs. If you have political beliefs and you feel very strongly about something, that is great. It shows me that you care. But there's a difference between caring and being a concerned citizen of the US versus being a fucking ideologue asshole that basically has to, more for ego, go out of their way to be assholes to other people and bully them because they don't agree to the same things that you do. Diotaz Devil is a perfect example of this. Like, you know, her popularity came from the death of a convention. And we can sit down sometime and really talk about how Rocky Mountain FurCon was poorly managed, and there was various strange goings-ons with its chairman and the treasurer. But at the end of the day, she made an off-the-cuff comment, and rather than clarify whether she was joking or not, she basically rode the wave and got this following that was, in my eyes, very artificial, and became the symbol of, like, you know, furries against fascists. And, you know, when her basically, the means by which she goes after people and tries to, like, I guess, browbeat them or defeat them in an argument or debate, it's really no different than, like, what a fascist would do in IMO. And so, that's where we are today, basically. Things have quieted down a little bit, but obviously with the elections and Donald Trump still being in office, Donald Trump being in office is sort of like, basically like a siren. Like, he keeps emanating these, like, shockwaves throughout the furry fandom, and, like, people, they get so emotionally invested in the rhetoric that he espouses, as well as what CNN and various other media corporations tell them. And it becomes, like, all you can talk about at the end of the day. Also, I couldn't help but notice that at Anthrocon and Eurofurence, those little, like, ribbons that says, you know, basically, like, fuck Nazis. I have no reason to support fascism or, you know, the KKK or white nationalism, but at the same time, like, at the end of the day, they are American citizens, and until they do something illegal, you don't have any right to, like, go out of your way and attack them. Like, physically attack them. I'm not saying that you can't, like, you know, denigrate them or, like, you know, criticize them harshly with condemnation, but at the same time, a lot of this rhetoric that's being thrown around, like punch Nazis, kill Nazis, and various other things, somebody's going to do something stupid eventually. Somebody's going to be filled up with basically mass hysteria and just, you know, attack somebody. And, you know, that's not going to be conducive to, you know, that's not going to help anybody, basically. And I'm not going to say that there aren't people out there that deserve it, but I see just as many people on the right as I do on the left that, you know, and vice versa, engaging in bullshit on a day-to-day basis that basically alienates people. You know, there's somebody I'm going to mention soon. His name's Dojo Dingo, and I didn't know him personally, but he seemed like a pretty stand-up guy. And I have to say, what happened to him at Anthrocon was truly, you know, it was truly disgraceful. And, you know, people would say, like, oh, he brought a gun to a convention. Whether or not he did, that was a hotel room. And whether it was I'd have to look into this further. I've been doing my own research. I didn't do it very, I didn't do vested research because of the whole Cure the Wolf thing. I think I did a pretty decent job covering all my bases with that particular video. But with Dojo Dingo, apparently he was doing, like, a gun safety course, you know, on camera, and just sort of, you know, demonstrating, hey, this is what you should think of. He's sort of like Patriot Dog. I know that dingoes are technically not dogs, but I consider them dogs. Wild dogs. Kind of like the African wild dog. Anyway, so Dojo Dingo, he was like sort of a patriotic dude, really red-blooded American, really into guns, really into, you know, just the standing ideals of a, you know, classical citizen. And what happened was, yeah, this is just an example. I'm going to get into better detail on another future video, but in his case, he brought a gun to a convention. He recorded himself on camera. He didn't bring the gun into the convention floors, but he did, you know, have it in his hotel room, as I can understand it. And basically somebody like pointed this out and attacked him for it on Twitter, and then the word got out that he brought a loaded assault rifle, which actually wasn't true. He brought a pistol. It was unloaded, and he didn't have any ammo, I don't think, for it. It was just like going through the motions of, hey, this is what you should think about when you're like, you know, loading your gun, you know, like just basic gun safety. And he got attacked for it, and like people were basically making death threats and like terroristic threats and basically like trying to dox him, and eventually he just pulled the plug and left the fandom because, like, you know, his livelihood was being under threat. Like, I think he has security clearance of some kind for his job, and if like word got out of this and he became known as like a public figure, then he stands to lose his job, or at least I don't know what the particulars are. I think it was like a government job. But, you know, it's not too far out of the way of, like, you know, the suspension of disbelief that drawing attention to something like that, it looks very bad, but it's not necessarily illegal. It might be, like, you could make the argument that maybe it was irresponsible on his part. I personally saw no problems with it so long as he didn't, like, bring a loaded gun into the convention center and wave it around or anything like that, you know? I know that a lot of people are freaked out because of the whole mass shootings, like, stuff going on, but you know, Dojo Dingo doesn't seem like the kind of guy that would do that sort of thing, and I certainly would trust him with my life, and I hope that trust isn't misguided. But yeah, it's just, that as an example, like, people are, like, looking for confrontation. People seem to be looking to criticize others. They seem to be looking for conflict, and they look for things, basically. People today are oversensitive as it is as far as their politics. They hold their beliefs very near and dear to their chest. As I mentioned in my last video about how social media facilitates the creation of echo chambers, it can be seen as, like the furry, how it is divided today. You only associate with people that absolutely agree with you to certain degrees, or you have a falling out because, you know, you just can't accept that the other person has disagreement with you in certain regards. So that's going to create problems further down the road as you know, fixate on whether a communist or a fascist is among you. And you look for certain qualities, and it's like, you know, X, Y, and Z make a communist. So if you have X and you have Z, you're bound to have Y. And, you know, like, obviously I'm exaggerating here. A lot of people, I don't think they're as emotionally invested in politics as, say, they are. But at the same time, you know, people have broad agreement on certain things, and people have broad disagreement on certain things. And it's hard to differentiate between the two sometimes. You know, people hold their beliefs close to their chest, and in some cases, any, like, disagreement is perceived as a threat to their mode of character. They can't stand to be threatened, so they're going to go on the offensive. And, you know, especially with furries, there's definitely a collectivist herd mentality, like, going on, sort of, in how they, you know, segregate themselves into two broad categories of groups, and the people that are in the center or on the outside looking in, and they are not held to this higher regard as, say, the people that are in the right or left camps. And politics this time around has had a huge bearing on, you know, why we're so divided as a fandom right now. Really, it comes down to a broad variety of issues for me. Number one, the mode of character of the individual. Number two, how closely their politics dictate how they relate with other people, because a lot of these people, it's not even their politics that make me, like, sort of frown down upon them. It's more the fact that they themselves, their character, their personality, and how they conduct themselves is just very, like, nasty and unnecessarily bitter. It's like, where does this hatred and vitriol come from? Why are you so angry at other people for just disagreeing with them? Why does it become a challenge to you? And why is it that you feel so, I guess, like, you know, averse to, you know, mere disagreement? And obviously, certain ideologies would paint somebody as being, you know, very atrocious of character. But at the same time, like, everyone has redeeming qualities, I'm sure. But to what degree, that's for you to decide. I'm just saying that I generally see a redeeming quality in certain people that have controversial ideologies. And I just wish that we could have some common ground. But how do you make sense of an irrational world? With great difficulty, I guess. Anyway, the furry fandom, as far as I'm concerned, is, and I say this as far as I'm concerned, because of social media and how divisive everything has become, is pretty, divided as it stands. And you have a phenomena by which people are actually leaving the fandom because they are tired of the drama. They're just tired of the bullshit. And it's like, it's not even regular drama. This is like above and beyond just going full force and piss and vinegar after people that are just like, not beholden to the same beliefs as you. And it becomes very tiresome, and for people that look to the furry fandom as an escape from their everyday lives, I can certainly understand why people would be so frustrated. And you have long journal entries about people that just have said, listen, I joined the furry fandom because I liked walking, talking animal people. I liked basically the inclusion, the acceptance, the tolerance that was espoused by the furry fandom at large. But now it's gotten really screwy, and I don't want to face up to this anymore because it's becoming more problems than it's worth. So bye. And this ultimately isn't going to help anybody at the end of the day. It's not going to help the leftists. It's not going to help the rightists. It's not going to help the centrists. People leaving the fandom is going to diminish the size of the fandom. There's only going to be so many people you can go after before, people get tired of it. They just leave. They'd rather not have to deal with your bullshit and just walk away. And that comes to today. Attendance numbers for a lot of these conventions have been going on the up and up and up. But I'm wondering how long that's going to last for if people keep leaving the fandom or just don't even bother showing up to conventions anymore. And people were literally cheering for the death of Rocky Mountain FurCon. Thankfully, these people were few and far between, but the perception was that because the furry raiders were going to Rocky Mountain FurCon was the simple fact that that was sort of a sign of endorsement for them. And seeing that they were, ready to boycott they were ready to boycott the convention. And, seeing Dio as the symbol that had conquered the convention, people were cheering for that, You shouldn't be cheering for the death of convention. Certainly, if I was in charge, I would have been yo, dude, Chairman Mao over here, you should probably step down as chairman because you have a bit of a record that makes you suspect, and I don't think people would feel comfortable if they knew about that. So, I don't know, things are just weird now. I say weird because, you have all these people that invest so many hours of their day just, being ideologues. They're just basically parroting, political ideas that they themselves have taken the mantle of, and basically attacking people that, criticize them or don't agree with them or pose antithetical beliefs to their own. So it's basically been a vicious cycle ever since the 2016 election. It shows no real signs of stopping. And I'm probably beating a dead horse talking about all this now, but I'm going to say it anyway. Basically, after I mentioned the Obama administration and how for 8 years certain liberal and progressive ideologies were taken as sovereign. There's definitely been an orthodoxy established in, based around liberalism and social justice and political correctness, and any threat to that sort of orthodoxy is perceived as a sin. They will go after you for any problematic opinions or beliefs that you have, even if you might be posing a legitimate argument or just basically questioning certain things, why they are the way they are. They see it as a threat. They can't have that, And I'm not saying that the Obama years weren't good. Personally, I think he could have done a better job with the economy, but for all intents and purposes, at least, on a normalized basis, people more or less have a sense of equality now. But I feel the vocal minority of either right or left or center has basically been the defining feature by which people, I guess, look at the worst aspects of any denomination, and they hold that the most vocal minority as being representative of the entire group, be it any group that you're talking about: conservative furries, liberal furries, communist furries, socialist furries, So And when they sort of have somebody that they can sort of point at and use as an example of how damaging that particular denomination happens to be to the fandom at large, they feel a sense of legitimacy that they can criticize that particular group more harshly. And it shouldn't be that way, you know? We should be able to have conversations mano a mano. We should be able to sit down and have an intellectually honest debate about the goings-ons that happen today and, you know, how we can sort of either at the very least coexist or commingle and, or at the very least, you know, agree to disagree. But that's not good enough for some people. People have to have absolute agreement, or if there's no agreement, then you are an absolutely terrible piece of shit that shouldn't see the light of day. So, furry fandom, divided. Why are we divided? Because people hold their beliefs and opinions very close to their heart. Certain people, their background as individuals has basically been conducive to this sort of mindset by which they see other people that are not in agreement with them as being basically problematic people that shouldn't be associated with and are terrible. And, you know, maybe certain people are validated in what they believe, but I feel that other people really bank on hyperbole, and they are very easily upset and just very emotional. And I've seen firsthand people just be very emotional from seemingly innocuous statements about politics. That's where we stand today. Like, we have a fandom divided. And the problem's not getting any better anytime soon. There's really been no push to facilitate a sort of common ground between right and left. And as I mentioned in my last video, how social media, like, you know, facilitates creation of echo chambers. This feels like a vicious cycle, and it's not going to really be solved until either enough time passes, time being the sort of influence that heals all wounds, as it were, or, you know, certain things really happen that make people sort of reassess where they stand and basically second guess themselves and acknowledge that maybe they might not be as right as they think they are. But going forward, as I mentioned, maybe don't castigate or, you know, write off anybody that happens to disagree with you, because diversity of opinions is a good thing. Like, you should have people that see things from different perspectives to yield new insights on a certain phenomena or event. And there are going to be some things that should be taken as natural law, that, like, you know, this would be the right thing to do in this situation. But it's not always obvious. It's not always easy. There are definitely going to be certain like gray areas that it's going to be very hard to decide what's right, what's wrong, you know? And, you know, with that, I would say I really hope that the furry fandom comes together as one again, and that we don't have to bicker and argue about needless, tireless bullshit that realistically has only a minute effect on your everyday lives. And that's not true for everybody, but it's true for most people, that the things that we fixate upon on a political level have a very small impact on your everyday life, and it might be felt over a period of years, but as it stands today, like, generally speaking, the situations that we argue about happen to be only, like, affecting a small proportion of everyday society. And if you happen to be in that small proportion, I am truly sorry, but, you know, for the rest of you, it's really not worth getting so emotionally worked up and invested in all this. People have too much time on their hands. They are too fickle, too emotional, too easy to seek contention with other people, and it's something that hasn't really been resolved as of yet. So I say all that just to say that hopefully one day we will figure this stuff out. We will come back together as a furry fandom, as a united furry fandom, instead of bickering and arguing about various needless bullshit, and, you know, going back to arguing about more important things, like whether, you know, what kinds of furry porn is best and better than other... No, I kid. I'm not getting down that... I'm not going down that road today. So, real quick, I just wanted to bring up something as I'm thinking about it right now. So, the whole 8 years of Obama... The whole 8 years of Obama basically had established a paradigm by which that certain tenets would be held to a higher standard as, like, you know, self-evident and sovereign. That these were the tenets by which, the rest of society would adhere, and through legislation and policy making, as well as social discourse, it had been accepted as, true and legitimate, and that any disagreement to that would be met with harsh criticism and scrutiny, as well as outright disagreement, because it had already been accepted at that point that it was, for all intents and purposes, self-evident and true. And you have a lot of people that are willing to white knight for these ideals, not because they necessarily understand what it actually means for them or the people that they are quote-unquote defending, but also because of the simple fact that, they think that they are honest and virtuous and, good people for doing this. And, the people that criticize them, you have a lot of trolls out there. You have a lot of people that, because it sort of meshes well with their ideology, their personal beliefs and opinions, and because they know that they're going to elicit such an outrageous reaction from, the left, they have taken on the mantles of being trolls and just, say things or do things to shock people or, make them outraged. And I really don't see either side as being truly good in all of this, And hey, I will be honest with you, I engaged in a little bit of trolling for a while, until I got banned from Twitter, but I don't think my banning was legitimate, so that's my admission to you all today. I recognize that it wasn't right, you shouldn't be doing this, and, trolling, get it out of your system and move on from that as fast as possible, because I'm all for, cheeky humor, I'm all for, just, poking fun at somebody, a little bit, get your jollies off, but there are people that just, aggravating them, it's not going to really satisfy you at the end of the day. It's not really bringing any value to the table. You're just needlessly being a dick. So what you should be doing is troll people with kindness, try to poke fun at the situation, not in a nasty way like people did with Christian, but in a more positive sort of food for thought, just. And if people get outraged like that, I think a good example was between Zarnazashi and Humongous. I don't know if you guys remember that, but there's that guy, I think he came from Seattle, but there was this one lady that came right up to him and just what's your name? And the guy basically dropped a dad joke. He's just humongous. The guy was a total dad, but she got so worked up about that into a tizzy, and then the security came over and actually asked her, hey lady, we hate to do this, but you're causing a bit of a scene, so we're going to have to ask you to leave. And, she was in an uproar. And you have various people like that are just out and about in society. I see people like that. It's really, the madness is not confined to the left. It is definitely on the right. It's on all points in between. You have, a society out there full of people that aren't always in their mental faculties. And, that being stated, it's definitely concerning that these people get worked up about a certain belief system or a set of ideologies, and they're willing to do things to, what they think is right in the moment. And a good example of this was the Bernie Sanders shooter. Remember that guy who shot all those Republican congressional people on a baseball field a while back? That guy was a nut. And you have a lot of people like that that are just nuts. And you have the capabilities to do some pretty damaging things to people, whether they be their fellow citizens or politicians, that it's very concerning that people are getting so worked up about politics again. And, we in the United States have it relatively well compared to other countries. For instance, we don't have people just getting shot in the streets, but at the same time, it's concerning that this is going on. And you had a lot of riots happen with Antifa and friends. It's a mess. So you had an established paradigm in the 8 years under Obama, and then you had somebody like Trump who said outrageous things, and he said very, I guess, just, he had a very boisterous, not very, he's, he wore his heart on his sleeve, he would just say things off the cuff. He was very blunt. He was very outspoken, and people didn't appreciate that. And so now you know, going on 2 years, you have this ongoing Mueller investigation that's gone pretty much nowhere, and you have people that are just fixated on it, like any day now he's gonna get impeached, any day now he's gonna get impeached, and then like he doesn't get impeached, and then they start screaming at the sky. That's where we are today. I'm serious. People are crazy. And like, if you're, I'm not asking you to like Trump, but at the same time, like, what's screaming at the sky gonna do? It's, so here's my theory. Why do we have a fandom divided? We have a fandom divided because that basically we live in a dishonest society. People aren't honest with themselves and are not honest with each other. And that's why they so quickly resort to straw man arguments between each other. That any construed or inferred or assumed position that the other person has, that they're going to maximize that and, like, you know, expand upon it to the point where it's like anybody that's vaguely conservative is automatically a Nazi, and anybody vaguely liberal is automatically a communist. And it keeps going on back and forth in these little two groups. I say little two groups because the groups themselves, like, they've like branched down and break down into their own subgroups. And so you have like two movements, I should say, because you have a multitude of different groups that comprise either movement. And at all points in between, you have like skeptics that are in between this. You have critics. You have people that want to be left alone. They don't want to talk politics. They want to take sides. They want to, like, they will agree or disagree on certain topics of interest and leave it at that. And it just never seems to end, you know? It's always about the next big thing that happens, be it a mass shooting or somebody getting elected that they don't like, or certain policies that get passed that they don't like. And, you know, it's like the slightest damage that causes, be it on an ideological level or on a fiscal or, like, you know, I guess welfare level, becomes like the greatest tragedy and sin. And so you have people just making outrageous statements, like saying that we need more socialism here in America today, or like how Venezuela's problems is because it doesn't have enough socialism. I don't know. It's going to be a tough 4 more years for, you know, moderates. I can tell you that right now. But in terms of the furry fandom, maybe we will find a way to have some common ground at the end of the day. I don't know. We'll see what happens, you know? We will definitely see what happens. Unless something happens that we won't see what happens. The nuclear missile aside. But yeah, not to make it so ominous, just stating that it came to me, you know, while I was talking about that for 30-40 minutes, that the whole reason that they have all these, like, you know, leftists and liberals in an uproar about conservatives and, you know, various other people that happen to be construed as conservatives is because there was an established paradigm that was broken when Donald Trump got elected, and they couldn't accept it. They couldn't, you know, internalize that. They could not, you know, acknowledge that his presidency had any merit or legitimacy. And so for 2 years going on, there's been sort of a soft resistance towards him. I say soft because these people are, like, really slacktivists. They don't really, like, protest out in public. They go to a few marches, maybe. It's more than I would say that I would do. But as you all know, I went to the Mother of All rallies and the Juggalo March, both of which had very different connotations, but I'll get to that another time. But, like, they're slacktivists. They basically shitpost on Twitter all day, and that's their form of resistance to Donald J. Trump. So, yeah. Till next video, guys, take care and peace. Hopefully you found this somewhat interesting or entertaining. And I will try to generate some better topics of interest in the next video. So, as I said, till next time, guys, take care and peace.